And the Three Sisters are no different. And so what we have here, corn here, we have squash over here and over here, and we have beans at the base of each one of these poles. So here we have the most traditional example of companion planting, the Three Sisters, brought to us by the First Nations. With companion planting, what happens is each plant helps each of the other plants. That's in many, many different ways, either with how they grow or with properties they have that help repel the other pests or help attract pollinators and so on. And the Three Sisters are no different. And so what we have here, corn here, we have squash over here and over here, and we have beans at the base of each one of these poles. So what's going to happen is this corn is going to help the beans along because it's going to grow tall and the beans are going to be able to grow up the corn. And so why do I have these stakes here? Because I don't want the beans to grow up the corn when the corn is still young and small. But I do want the beans to have already grown by the time the corn gets big. And so the beans are going to grow up these stakes, and then as the corn grows, the beans are going to attach themselves also to the corn. And so the beans are going to be anchored to these stakes and to the corn, and they're going to hold the corn up. Because the thing about corn is it has a tendency, when it's standing alone, to fall down in a heavy wind. Now, sometimes corn will grow side shoots. You shouldn't pull these side shoots off, because often people will tell you to pull them off. But these side shoots, especially if your corn is standing alone, will help the corn to stand up. Also, if for some reason the main stem gets damaged, well, these side shoots are going to replace that main stem. I wouldn't worry about the side shoots taking the energy from the rest of the plant. They're there for a reason. They're going to help the plant. What else does the beans do for the corn and the squash? The beans give a shelter to bacteria in their roots. Those bacteria will take nitrogen from the atmosphere, and they basically eat that nitrogen and they transform it into a form that the plants can eat. So the beans are going to feed themselves, the corn, and the squash. And corn is a really heavy feeder, so beans are a great thing to plant with corn or after corn to refeed the soil. And the squash are going to help the beans and the corn. Why? Because first of all, squash eventually get really, really big leaves, and so the squash leaves are going to shade the soil and keep it moist, and shade the roots of the plants to keep it cool as well. The other thing squash do, I don't know if you can see them, but there are little tiny prickles on the stems and on the vines. And the little animals really don't like the prickles. And these prickles get harder and stronger as the plant grows. And so the little animals don't like it. So now the important thing to remember about the Three Sisters, like the other companion planting, is timing. And so I will generally plant the corn and the squash at the same time, because I want to make sure the squash has time to grow big before the corn gets big. Because if the corn gets too big before the squash is grown, the squash is going to get shaded out and it's not going to grow much. And you really want your squash to really be big and to spread around the whole area for it to be able to properly protect the corn and the beans. I will plant the beans later, a couple weeks after the corn and squash at least, because beans have so much energy in their seed that they're going to germinate quickly and grow quickly, even if they're shaded out. They're a vine, they're just going to grow quickly and get higher than the rest of the plants. And another thing you can remember about the beans is, if you can have a look at the vine right here, it's starting to grow. Let's say you've got a trellis for it or something, or a teepee, and it reaches the top of the teepee, and you still want it to let it grow. If it keeps growing taller, it's just going to bend over and then fall over. You can trim the end of your bean vine And it's gonna have, if you trim the end of it once it's reached the top of your teepee, then it's gonna grow new branches along the vine, and you're gonna get a lot more beans harvested. It's the deer that taught us that when they came and ate some of our bean vines a few years ago. Now the last thing I want to show you, I've spoken about this before, you might notice that there are some potato plants here. These were not planned. I put potatoes here in 2021 because I wanted potatoes here instead of the Three Sisters, but they've come back ever since, even though I've never planted them. And last year, for example, they came back so thickly in some of these hills I didn't really get much of a harvest of squash. But what I decided to do this year was just keep cutting it down like it's a weed until all these plants get established, and then I'll let the potatoes grow and sort of grow in underneath everything else. And then by the time all this stuff is almost done, the potatoes will still have time to produce. Now what's interesting about having the potatoes here is in May, let's say, when I sow my squash, there's often a lot of cucumber beetles that grow, that come and eat the seedlings. But here where we have the potatoes, in contrast to in the back, further behind in the garden where we have more Three Sisters but no potatoes, the squash grew a lot better. Somehow the potatoes masked the squash somewhat from the cucumber beetles. We did have some, but not nearly as many, and yet both areas have been equally planted with the Three Sisters, and so should have had an equal amount of damage from the cucumber beetles. But in the other areas where there are no potatoes, squash really got eaten up a lot, whereas here they didn't. My solution to those other areas was I always have backup squash plants that I plant in a little pot. I prefer to direct sow squash because it grows quickly, but I always plant backup. And I didn't really need a whole lot of my backups here anyways because of the potatoes. I needed some of them in the other area where there were none, but all those extra backup squash, well, I was able to plant them elsewhere outside the garden to give to the animals if they want them. I put them back in the forest. Three Sisters, beans, corn, and squash. This has been an excerpt from our video entitled Simple and Complete Guide to Companion Planting. Use your plants to control pests and optimize growth. I'll put a link to the full video at the end of this video and also in the description. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time. Early morning birdsong, June 18th, 2025.